I am Daniel Ortiz, and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years, and today I have my special guest. He is the author of the book As Large as Your Spirit, a reverse refugee memoir, no other than Mr. Joel David Bond.
Thanks for having
Welcome
me
to
today.
Yes, fabulous, fabulous, Mr. Joel, and welcome to Book 101 Review. And can you please introduce more about yourself?
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show today, Daniel. I appreciate you reaching out to have me on. As you said, I'm Joel David Bond and the author of As Large as Your Spirit, a reverse refugee memoir, which is a book about my quarantine experience trapped on a Greek island and working with refugees while attempting to get back to my then adopted home of northern Iraq. So it's my first full length book. I have several other short pieces that are out there on the internet. And I'm currently based in West Africa, in Cote d'Ivoire. So a bit of a global citizen all over the world. And just excited to share my work with the world right now.
Yes, Mr. Joel, thank you so much for sharing your memoir to the world. And what is the central premise of As Large as Your Spirit?
The whole thing centers around the concept of finding a place to call home, not just physically, but also emotionally and spiritually. So, obviously, there's the external factor of being caught away from home during the pandemic. So, I was caught for 5 months on this Greek island, unable to get back to my home in Iraq. And I crossed paths with refugees that were from the Middle East trying to get to the West. And so it was this sort of crossing of paths between two different sides of the globe here on this Greek island. But in the context of that story and that experience, I actually really quickly learned that it was more about just finding a physical, more than just finding a physical home. But what does it mean to be comfortable in my own self? Because that experience of lockdown, being away from home, being away from friends, being away from family, being away from everything that was familiar, started to raise lots of internal questions that needed answering. And so the entire experience really is about this concept of what does it mean to be settled? What does it mean to be comfortable in your own skin, let alone in the physical geographical place where you are? So it's about my experience, but also those of those refugees that I worked with, and what does it mean for them to be settled and to find places to call home as well.
How does the memoir define the concept of reverse refugee?
Yeah, so I chose that as a subtitle, the reverse refugee, because I really wanted to play on the idea of working with refugees that I physically met along the journey of the course of the book, but also give a nod to the fact that I'm not a refugee, but I was living a very similar experience. And so I wanted to create a kind of parallel concept where even though I was caught in Greece for reasons of my own will, more or less, as opposed to being caught there because, that's where it ended up because I was captured by smugglers or whatever it might be. The concept really was that I wanted to create this parallel where emotionally I was experiencing some of the same things. And I was able to connect with my refugee students on those feelings of isolation, loneliness, having lost things that were familiar to you, and also play with the concept of I was looking to go back to a place where many of these refugees were coming from. Many of them had left the Middle East, had left zones of conflict to get away from them. And here I was attempting to get back to those same places that they had left because that's where my work and my purpose lay at that point in time. So it is this kind of reverse trajectory where I was fleeing from places that a lot of people had, I was trying to get back to a lot of places people had fled from. And that's the kind of toy there, the kind of play on words with the reverse refugee concept.
So, what motivated you to write your personal journey as a reverse refugee?
The motivation really came from probably a year after returning from that experience. And I remember relating to a friend of mine. We were in a local bar, just sort of talking about uh, just general life or whatever. And I started talking about the experience of meeting a monk before being stuck on the island, and how I was really impressed with this monk who was my age, a Greek Orthodox, religious monk who was in this monastery. Um, and I was just really impressed with his view on life and how he had been called by God to leave his career of working with the Border Patrol to follow a life of service in the faith. And I remember recounting this story and immediately realizing, sort of way after the fact, that I had met this monk just a week before being quarantined on this island. The very island where the monk had once worked, the very island where the monk had once delivered refugees and rescued them from these boats to be quarantined on this island. And here I was then a year later recounting the story of being caught on the island and working with some of the same refugees that perhaps he had once quarantined and contained. And so it was this sort of aha moment of wow, like I had forgotten that those two experiences were within the same space, the same timeline. And it really sort of motivated me to think, oh, well, how could I weave this real life true experience into a narrative, a memoir experience that people would really want to read? And so that was kind of my aha moment that lit the fire under my butt to actually write the story.
Aha, Eureka. So, what is the significance of your experience in relation to larger themes of migration and belonging?
I think the story that I am sharing here, one, is just it's profoundly personal, but also universal in the sense that so many people are looking to find meaning in their lives. They're looking to find a place to call home, a place to feel like they belong. And I think the story that I'm providing sort of helps people connect with those larger issues, helps them see one person who's navigated that and hopefully uncover a path for themselves on how they might be able to achieve the same thing.
Very well said. Mr. Joel, very well said. You need a big applause. So, how does your memoir explore the complexities of identity and self discovery?
Um, it goes through kind of a hero's journey where I've left home. I've kind of unintentionally been thrown onto this quest of being stuck in Greece and making a life for myself there for 5 long months. And during the challenges and the problems that I faced there, having to really reflect and think, well, what do I want in life? What do I want this experience to be? Do I just want to sit and wallow in the fact that I'm stuck here and can't go anywhere? Or do I want to try and make something out of this experience that's worthwhile, that brings meaning and purpose and joy to my life and hopefully to the lives of others? And so I think the memoir itself is twofold. It's one, I'm actually living the experience in the memoir. I'm connecting with people. I'm meeting the farmers on the island. I'm connecting with the hotel proprietor. I'm meeting gypsy children that live in containers on the beach just a mile down the road from where I was staying. I'm meeting refugees that are living in a camp on the other side of the island, and at the same and learning about all these different facets of life. And at the same time, as you the reader read the memoir, you also can relive some of those same experiences, but also reflect on your own journeys and who are the people that you're meeting in life. What are the experiences that are shaping who you are, and what are the things that you are learning through all of that on your own personal journey? So for me, it's kind of it's a twofold thing with the memoir. It's having lived the experience, then helping you live that experience through me, and then hopefully helping you analyze and reflect on your own life and the journey that you're taking.
Yes, for sure. So, how does your memoir reveal about emotional impact or displacement, or in reverse sense?
Can you repeat the question?
How does your memoir reveal about emotional impact of displacement, or in reverse?
Uh, I think, the emotional impact of displacement. Um, there's scenes in the book where I talk about losing my house in Iraq. I lost the place where I lived. It was sold out from underneath me, and I didn't have anything to go back to, on one sense. And relaying that kind of experience while also talking about refugees that were living in under canvas tents amid the rats and the insects and the exposure to the elements in the refugee camp just on the same island where I was. I think creates both an empathy and a stark contrast. Um, there's an empathy for having lost what's familiar and living in a difficult situation, but also a stark contrast between those who are truly destitute and reaching for a better life compared to myself at the time that was there relatively in a sense of privilege. um, and so it's for me it was really this sense of having to come to grips with comparison. The log in my own eye was much larger than the speck in my neighbor's, kind of, or the speck in my own eye versus the log in my neighbor's, however the phrase goes. um, but also the fact that pain that's felt is pain that's real. So even if other people have much larger problems than those that I was experiencing, that the pain that I was experiencing personally just felt much more real and much more pertinent than maybe the pain that was happening, you know, just a few miles down the road. And yet also learning how to deal with both mine and other people's pain and that sense of human empathy. So, it really is it's an emotional and deep spiritual journey, really, in learning how to cope with life's circumstances.
Yes, for sure. So, what are the most significant challenges did you face in adapting new life in the island?
Um, One of the biggest challenges that I faced was attempting uh, to really move too fast, too quickly, to try and make something for myself in a space that wasn't really mine. And I remember partway through my quarantine experience, I thought I would maybe try and move into the nearest town and get a job and kind of just accept the fact, resign myself to the fact that I had now, moved indefinitely to this Greek island. And I found myself 10 days later having a panic attack and realizing that I'd kind of made the wrong choice, that I had attempted to force myself in, as a square peg into a round hole kind of, scenario. And uh, I think for me, that was a really big challenge trying to make a home for myself in a space where I wasn't ready to call it home, where it wasn't, and that space wasn't ready to accept me as as someplace to be there as well. And I think that taught me a lot about patience, taught me about taking my time to really measure my actions and my words before jumping into decisions. Um, and also recognizing that the right things come along at the right times. That you can try to orchestrate as much as you want, but at the end of the day, um, when the fruit is ripe in your life, it'll be ready to be picked.
100%, I think I agree with you. So, how does your memoir depict the resilience and inner strength through your journey?
I did one of these podcast interviews a few months ago, and resilience was a word that kept coming up. And we talked about palm trees, the metaphor of a palm tree, and how palm trees are incredibly resilient. They will bend, but they don't break. The hurricane can come through and they'll sway with the intense breeze, with the intense wind, the intense storm. But rarely do you see a palm tree snapped in half. And it's because they have this inner strength of character, really, to these deep roots. that hold them in the eye of the storm. And I think in the book, what I hope the reader walks away with is this sense of depth of character I had to develop in the space, the meditation that I performed, the reflection, the journaling, the thoughts and the people and the experiences that I had to come to those sorts of conclusions to be resilient. Um, and realizing that I had no choice but to be resilient. You know, there was no other choice. I couldn't just say, "Oh, I'm not going to do this anymore," and leave. I was stuck. I wasn't permitted to leave. There were, legal blockades. There were logistical blockades to leaving the island, and I had no place to really go. And so it was a sink or swim scenario. It was like be resilient or what? You know, there was no other option. It was be resilient. And so learning to do that through all of those scenarios and the scenes that you read in the book, I think, that's the whole journey. That's the whole journey of the memoir.
So, Mr. David, what will be your advice for those aspiring writers out there want to write their memoir?
Show up for the muse. I think so often we wait to be inspired. We wait for the moments when it's like, okay, inspiration's hit. I'm going to sit down and write, crank out 30 pages today. I'm going to do whatever. Like we have these moments where we just want to be super productive. And I think really the best advice that I've been given and that I would give to anyone else is simply show up, be there every day for the muse to just write. Even if you only get 2 words on the screen, great. You showed up and you did the work, because it's the little drops in the bucket over time that eventually create the big work. And if you wait for inspiration to strike, you'll never get it done.
Don't wait, people. Stop procrastinating. If you have something to share to the world, share, 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 like Mr. Joel David Bond. So, what is your short term and long term goals in writing?
Short term is to show up for the muse and work on my second book. So my short term is to sit down and actually do it on a daily basis or a weekly basis at this point, given my schedule in life. Long term, I would love to. I have one other book I'm currently working on. I have another idea for a book and a third beyond that, which is in development. So I'd love to, long term, get 4 books out there. Um, about my life's experiences. So we'll see what happens.
Looking forward for more books, Mr. Joel, and good luck for your goals.
Thank you.
To sum up our discussion, how or what insight does your memoir offer about intersection of culture, migration, and identity?
Ooh, yeah. I think it toys a little bit with the concept of third culture kids or our very multicultural, postmodern world where everyone's identity is a mix of everything. So often we ask the question, well, where are you from? And the response is this long winded, well, I was born here, but I grew up there, but I haven't lived there for a long time. And now I live here, but it's not really home yet. I mean, we have these sort of, scenarios where everybody's a blend of all these different origins and ethnicities and backgrounds and locations and, geographical places. And so I think this book really helps address some of that for people who are global nomads, for people who are living in new cultures or adopted cultures that aren't their own, for people who are looking for spiritual direction, for grounding in their own personhood, for an inspiring read on coming to grips with your own, personality and personhood identity. So, for me, I think As Large as Your Spirit really addresses that, the bigger metaphysical things as well. It's not just a good yarn about being stuck on an island during quarantine and working with refugees. It's about being stuck in your own self and wondering how to get free.
Mr. Joel David Bond, thank you so much for sharing your memoir to the world. And I hope and looking forward for more empowering books. So, Mr. Joel, can you please invite our listeners? to support your memoir?
Yes, you can find me on the internet at joeldavidbond.com. My book, As Large as Your Spirit, is available on Amazon in paperback, hardback, and Kindle. And I'm on social media platforms LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, all at Joel David Bond.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Joel David Bond because if you support him, more empowering books to come. So, Mr. Joel, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Have a great day.
More to come, people. See you soon. Mr. Joel, I encourage you to do an audio book for your memoir by your voice.